sort of at the end of the 60s and into the 70s, studying a lot about social movements and being quite involved in, especially in the Philadelphia area. I went to study and was involved in the anti-nuclear demonstrations that really slowed down and practically stopped the U.S. nuclear industry, nuclear plants from being built. I've also been involved for a very long time in the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, in the Quaker meeting here, and I spent a lot of time raising my children, so that sort of took away from some of my activism for a few years, but I always felt we needed to have a nonviolence resource center so people could find out what has been proven in nonviolence and how successful nonviolence can be. And when I had this idea years and years ago, but didn't actually get to start it until a couple of years ago, and we had this program called PeaceWorks, located at the Quaker Meeting House with a library and resources and programs and workshops that I've given you the information. So what we're going to do today is sort of like a mini version of that kind of training, and I have to say that in the context of what's happening right now with the Occupy Wall Street and also the demonstrations against the tar sands in both Ottawa and Washington, it seems like there is an opportunity, a real moment for a very big shift. The reason we started the workshops, I was interested in starting the workshops, is I felt like we do a lot of events, but the events are not necessarily part of a campaign. We don't really understand how to put the pieces together to go from an idea and a concern to a successful movement that will bring about change in the end. I think it's fabulous that we're having a film tonight on Gene Sharp, because of course a lot of these ideas are developed by Gene Sharp, and you can download from his website the From Dictatorship to Democracy resource that you can have, which is based on what was used to bring down Milosevic in Serbia, that successful campaign, and also for the training in Egypt. Because they trained and prepared for, I think, about 3 years, and they used people from Serbia who were trained in this method to develop the training and to get the program ready before they found the right moment for Tahrir Square. And you'll find that throughout history that people do a lot of preparation and then they find the right moment. So, for example, Rosa Parks looks like she just decided to do that one day, but it's not true. It came out of a campaign that was built, training that was done, and a movement that was ready for that moment. So, before we get into the more details about how people build a social movement and the role that symbols, slogans, chants, and so forth play, I'd like to give a chance to just hear from people in the room about what brought you here today and what has led to your activism, you personally, like more of a personal sharing. So your name and kind of what led you into activism. So would you like to start?
Mary Grove from Scarborough, and I think my activism, the core of it is peace, trying to get rid of war. And the one thing is that bothered me as a young person was, as I grew up and had income, to be paying money knowing that it was supporting the military. So I joined our friend Lyn Adamson's impetus and joined the organization and withheld my peace tax, my military tax. Now I'm with the organization, but promoting it, so I came today.
That's Conscience Canada.
Conscience Canada, yes.
Thank you. Mary. Good, thank you. Good.
My name is Marta.
Speak up, Marta.
My name is Marta.
Yeah.
In my outside voice. And I grew up in London, Ontario, North London to be specific. And I didn't realize that everybody didn't get a PhD when they grew up. And I didn't realize that my father, as a professor at the university, did not put us in the lower middle class. So very skewed sense of the world. And at the same time, I knew that I had things that other people didn't. And even as a young child, I knew that there was something unbalanced. I became an activist when I was 19 years old. I had a boyfriend who told me he was Lebanese, but I realized afterwards he was Palestinian. And we were lying in bed one night. He was asleep, and a helicopter flew over, and he started to shake. And he didn't even wake up, but he started to shake. And in that moment, I said, this is going to stop. I don't know how, and I don't know what I'm going to contribute, but that this is going to stop. Here I am.
Hi everyone, I'm Kieran. I guess my activism isn't really a choice. I have never really excelled at anything or felt comfortable in anything. I'm not very strong academically, but I am very good verbally, and that's not really appreciated. So I got by finding my voice, and I found it's hard to yell about something you don't care about. So now I'm just doing it because it's the only way I know how to get by.
My name's Maureen, and I came into this world, I mean, this whole question of where activism comes from is really interesting. I have Mennonite roots, but I wasn't raised Mennonite, and I just always was driven to peace. And I'm an anomaly in my family, so I think it's in the DNA. But I connected first and most strongly with First Nations, who weren't known as that at the time, and devoted my life. It sort of chose me, and so my life was driven by the need to rectify that terrible injustice on Turtle Island and around the world. So I ended up becoming a professor, teaching human rights, and working on the Declaration of the United Nations, the Indigenous Declaration, for 10 years. So that was really huge. And then while I was at the UN, I learned about East Timor, and nobody knew about it, nobody was doing it, and so I took that on as well. And we co-founded the East Timor Alert Network in Canada, and had great success with that ultimately. So I think that's, and we're still working to accomplish, what we're driven to, and this moment is really very exciting, and was prophesied by the First Nations at the UN. When I went there, I was privileged to hear elders from around the world bringing the prophecy about this time and the change that was coming. So you sort of recognize it now, but yeah.
My name is Rob Atchison. I live in Pickering. I haven't been an activist all my life. I manage a corrugated box plant in Markham, so I've been involved in business. But my daughter, who is now 29, when she went to the University of Toronto, did peace and conflict things, and she started leaving a lot of textbooks around and challenging me on a lot of things. And it really started to change a lot of my worldview. And I hadn't really been attracted to the peace movement because it just, to me, coming from the business perspective, seemed very negative. Don't do this, don't do that, stop the war, ban the bomb. But we have crisis, so instead of telling us what not to do, let's find out what we can do. And then I ran across a website. It actually came through Stephen Harper's office, believe it or not, because I got started, and I was very angry, really, about the direction we were going. And I wrote just a very general letter about the militarization of Canada to his office. He never responded, his aide never responded. Someone in the office saw the letter, sent me an email, and said, here's a website you might be interested in. It's for the Canadian Department of Peace Initiative. And so I read through the website. This was in 06, I guess, December of 06. And I sent them an email, and in April of 07, about 60 of us went up to Ottawa and started to throw around this idea, which had been worked on for a couple of years at that point. But anyway, about 60 of us got together, Lyn and I met there, and we went back to our separate cities from Victoria through to Charlottetown and started chapters. So since then, I've been lobbying members of Parliament, working to raise public awareness. Lyn and I co-chair the Toronto chapter of the Canadian Peace Initiative. So that's where I'm coming from, which is a little different group than most activists that I know.
Sorry, you can wait if you'd like till we just finish, and then we'll come back. We're just doing a go round about what our names and what got started in activism. So we'll do Jorge next. Yeah.
My name is Jorge. I'm originally from Venezuela, South America. I was a guy of the system all my life. salesman, very successful salesman in my country. Then my country have a political change, and I decided to leave my country at all cost. That means I sell everything, take my wife and my 3 kids, and fly away to some place, any place I can find to start again from zero. I applied for a Canada visa. I was denied at that time, and the only one that gave me a visa was the States, tourist visa. Then I take that, put my family in a plane and bring it to the States. We lived 3 years there. Finally, for political reasons, I have to left the States, and I'm reach Canada like a refugee. I tried to do a process of refugee for very long time, and was denied. Everything was wrong. Nothing works. Finally, I learned about a different process that the name is humanitarian and compassionate, and I applied for that process, and I was received my residence to that way. And this is basically, that was 10 years ago that I'm living in Canada. I live in Colombia, in Venezuela, United States, and Canada. And I noticed, unfortunately, that in everywhere is the same corruption. Everywhere is the same problems. Different levels, yes, but every time I was too successful in a company, I reached the point where I have to breed somebody in order to the final sign for a contract or anything. And I blame my father, because my father said that I have to be honest guy. And I blame him very, very hardly, because I can believe that that doesn't work in the real world. You can be honest in a business. It's difficult. It's against the business. That means, but late in my life, I learned that I know for sure that something was wrong in the system, but I can figure it out. I try to do my best. I try to do my work very, very hard. I try to do the things works, but nothing happened. Then I found the Zeitgeist movement in a web page someday, and was like a light bulb this big, I see other people seeing the same problems that I see during my life, and I decide to work on that. And that's why I'm a late activist, but I'm an activist.
Thank you, Bertie. Great.
I'm Victor, and for some reason that I cannot explain, all my life I have the sense of the social justice. And I come from a very messy country, so because the system doesn't work, everybody has their own constitution. So when you go on the street, whatever is applied here doesn't apply over there. So it's a fight all day long. And on top of that, I had a sense of the social justice, so I used to fight all the time. So I came to Canada, and then for some reason through the internet, so I get to the documentary Zeitgeist. I saw the first, okay. Then when I saw the second one, I could find the pieces, the puzzles I was missing. How to put a thing in order, to understand why the system doesn't work, and why we see the many social injustices, why that happened. So since then, that was 3 years ago, I might say that I started to be an activist 24/7. I don't get paid for it, but I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for those of you who came in as we were going around, it was the introduction and also just what has led us to activism, because we have to start with ourselves. Like this is about expressing ourselves. You talked about voice in the world and expressing your voice. You talked about being moved by really compassion for what you saw when you realized other people were not having the same privileges and opportunities that were experiencing trauma and terror. And Mary, you talked about the kinds of injustice that you saw caused by war and your objection to your taxes going to war, and various other reasons that people gave in their background for getting involved. And it's really important that we understand what it is that leads us to getting involved. So let's hear from those of you who came in. Also, I'm giving out this if you don't have a copy of it. It's just a piece we'll refer to later. But would you like to start?
Sure. My name's Matthew, and I grew up going to an alternative school, and it was part of every day was actually being politically savvy and protesting and stuff like that. So it's always just been part of my personality since I was very, very small. Like knowing that you have to be out there and show what you believe in. Vitally important.
Great.
My name's Amy Dillon.
Amy?
Naomi Dillon.
Naomi, sorry. Okay.
I'm a night owl by nature. But I've been involved in nonviolent causes since, I would say, early high school. I used to actually be part of Leave Out Violence, which is an organization.
What's your organization?
Leave Out Violence Love.
Okay.
Which is an organization that was about young people promoting nonviolent methodologies to countering violence in the society. And it started out in Montreal. There's a chapter in Toronto. There's one in Vancouver. And I used to be involved in a youth organization called the PayPal Lessons Resource Center for youth in trauma.
PayPal Lessons.
PayPal, sorry. It's and it was a center for young people in foster care, and who often encounter and the youth who would come to the center were both from Toronto. Some of them were refugees who lost their parents in Sudan, who came to Toronto without anything. And so it's just been like an interesting time to figure out ways to like approach problems in society to non-violent methodologies.
First of all, excuse me for coming in late. I really feel I wish I'd heard everybody else's stories. In any case, maybe we'll sort that out some other time through the day. My name's Cam. Let's see. How have I come to activism? Well, it's interesting because right now I don't function as an activist as such. Right now, I work and make a living in mainstream media, so that means there's all these little rules and stuff like that about what you can and can't do. That being said, I mean, definitely in my background as a whole, I mean, it's really formative for me in terms of identifying as an activist. I was born and raised in Toronto in the early 70s. My parents came here as immigrants. I came of age as a teenager during the 80s in North America, which meant that issues around nuclear proliferation were huge. So I think my initial kind of interest and exposure was around issues having to do with nonviolence and pacifism on that kind of a global scale. The whole day after the idea that a bomb could drop. This is when Reagan was president and all the rest of it. I got involved with direct action at that time, and also what was going on for me personally was there was an intersection there. Again, it was the mid-80s, and I was expelled from my Catholic high school at the time for being gay, and and that was very hard, AIDS was also going on and so forth. I found myself living on social assistance for a period of time, and anyway, through a bunch of kind of good breaks, luck, and what the system provided at that time in terms of support for young people. I think I was able to definitely find supports back to work and, engagement and all this kind of jazz. So it's been a tricky, I think, through the 90s and the 2000s in terms of trying to, for me, come back to that kind of home, or that kind of knowing, or that kind of identification. Because, I know so many activists and social justice people, feel, and I don't want to go on and on and on about it, but usually there is such a wall, I think, between establishment institutions and mainstream institutions and people who work for change, and I'll just wrap up by saying one of the reasons I come to things like this and I really value being in these kinds of contexts is because it does feel like a bit of coming home and a kind of nurturance and kind of grounding, vis-a-vis other environments.
Great. Well, that's good. And I'll just say that for myself, my parents started attending the Quaker meeting when I was 10. And I have to say that when I first realized, sort of what you Martin went with, that not everybody had enough to eat, like, well, the problems in the world and then the way Mother Nature is being treated, like the whole, like it just was so very shocking and saddening, and I wanted to kind of give up my life actually. I thought, well, gosh, I don't want to live when there's this much suffering and there's so much pain. And then I realized, well, you can't, there's something better than giving up your life, and that is to really make your life a voice for change. And luckily, I found through the experience of the Quaker Summer Camp that we learned about people who made a difference. They don't teach you about it in school. People have made a difference, either singly, but more importantly in movements and social movements. And so that, if you can end slavery as we knew it then, there's other forms of slavery now, of course, but and you can get the vote, and you can change the government, and you can change society in so many meaningful ways, then let's get busy, because we sure have a lot of things to do. So my first thing was with the Amchitka test blasts that were taking place, and just a petition in my high school about that. So starting at that level, but then going on to study, as I said, in Philadelphia Movement Society, to learn about how do you build a campaign and a movement and really bring about change. So this is important knowledge for us, and now with the what's happened with the Egyptian revolution, and which has to continue, because look at Egypt now. It's not like it's over. None of these things are ever over, but those dynamics, and working with the dynamics to change how you end up changing social institutions and creating a new culture. That is the question.
Just talking on what you said about feeling like you didn't want to be alive. In grade 10 of school, struggles with school, I tried to commit suicide, and that was really the turning point for me. School was not a big deal, obviously. I've got the rest of my life to figure that out, but here I am thinking it's so important. And it kind of made me realize that the truth is relative to everyone, that we have our own truths, and that was the scariest thing in the world to me. Because we were all wandering around just pretending we knew what was going on. And what excited me about it, though, when I finally turned myself around, was realizing that change is ongoing. That, yes, things aren't perfect, but 100 years from now, I can't imagine what the quality of life will be. I have no idea. And that was something that just, I don't know, made me feel like I was on my second mind.
Yes, so looking at the future, where do we want to be? So thank you for sharing that, Kieran. And the importance of starting with our own power, internal, like there are different dimensions of power. And the first one is inner, so realizing that we have a strength of voice and we can think differently, make our own observations and choices that aren't dictated by conventional, way everybody else, like you say, we're going around acting like we know what we're supposed to do or whatever, and then discovering what it is that we're really called to do, the idea of following our own drummer or something like that to change. But the listening to our voice, and that's sort of a Quaker concept too, that you have that inner voice that will tell you, whether it's a voice of conscience or some deeper connection to the world that goes beyond the conventional wisdom of our time, because conventional wisdom is not the whole picture. So knowing that we're learners and thinkers and doers and changers and all of those things, that's what we need to bring to the social movement, and that's extremely important. So it's not all about our intellect, it's about this inner process as well, inner knowing. So I'd like you to take a minute and now just turn to, I think we'll do you three, and then you three, and then maybe you four, and you will talk just for a minute about, some kind of social action that you were part of that impressed you, that moved you, that connected with you somehow, something, or you were either involved or you saw it happen, but it moved you, connected you, and why? So what was it about that particular social movement that worked? So you three. What insights did you get from that process of reflecting? Just feel like what ideas might you want to share with the whole group that came up in your small group? That what made an action powerful or effective or moved you? What are some ideas?
Isolation and I guess just a common body were two things that kept coming up, for me anyway. When I think about any problem I'm experiencing, it's normally because I'm experiencing isolation either externally or internally, and what brings me out of that is having not a person I can connect with necessarily, but it's wonderful to have people you can connect with in life. That's what the foundation of community is.
Yeah. But
it's a lot easier when there is a group like this, when you can walk in and out of a room and it's accessible. And I'm really interested in some of the techniques you have available to help us work with that.
Yeah, and so feeling a point of connection with others is really a critical point.
Bringing yourself out of that isolation and identifying what is affecting the isolation.
Okay. Any other observations? What was powerful and effective? Come and join us.
I think in our case,
well, an example that you like for telling.
I can feel that the education process killed the possibilities to think out of the box.
Right, right.
In my case, because I lived that for a lot of years, thinking that the system was okay, that the system was doing the right things. Even I try to don't think or don't see the problems around me, but was a lot in the societies where I live. And in his case, I'm sorry to talk about you, but he learned the life in a different way that the system provides. Was an alternative education system.
Yeah.
And he was open-minded since very young. That means this is two different approaches to the life. And for sure, I think that the most important thing is the society don't give us the weapons to fight anything.
Yeah, to be creative with it. Yes, so being creative, that was nurtured in the alternative school, right? So that was powerful too. So connection and creativity, and you just, Terry, welcome to Kelly. Yeah, Carrie. Carrie, sorry. Sorry. And actually, let's just go around and let's just all together say everybody's name, so that way, sort of a quick introduction. Mary, right? Marta. Kieran. Maureen. Rob. Carrie. Naomi.
Matt.
Victor. Yeah, and Lyn. And we're powerful together. So connection, creativity, those are really important. Was there anything else that kind of jumped out at folks that was, yeah, Maureen?
I think that the thing that keeps coming back again to that Cam mentioned is that it doesn't take a lot of people to be the seed, and that we're each called to do our bit of the puzzle, and it doesn't take a lot of people. It takes one or two to start, and that's really, it's wonderful to see the explosion that's happening, but you know, sort of the old work with need idea, I guess.
Sure. You never get it that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Need is the only thing that ever has. So,
So just coming in late from this, as I was driving down here, on the radio they were talking about a campaign that's sort of come along.
Speak up, because
It's come alongside with the with Occupy, wherever. And it's something that a lot of people have been talking about for a number of years, and that's getting your money out of the main banks and putting it into credit unions. So this morning on Facebook, there's a woman who's down in California, and they were interviewing her on CBC today, who has just voiced that through her Facebook, and first through her friends, and then it expanded from her friends, and she put it on Facebook, and put I can't remember what the symbol is. I think it may be a similar symbol with the fist, and then something to do with the banks, and then getting into the credit union. So she's posted that, and she started up with 500 people joining up with her, saying by November the 5th, they were all going to get their money out of the banks and put them in the credit unions. And she's now up to 30,000 people who are saying that they are going to do this as well. So it's just within 9 days of her posting this is what's happening. Yeah.
So you have a moment that is ripe, that people are just so
ready to hear it.
devastated by what they've seen happen with the business as usual, or as it used to be. It's going to change forever now. And using the popular media. So being able to do that outreach and providing that example by saying, I'm going to do that, who's going to join me?
Right.
Yeah. So taking that initiative out of this. Okay. Good. Yes, so there are all these elements. Like one of the ways to think about how to approach a social problem that you want to change is to have the vision of what you want. So she's putting out a vision of an alternative financial system that values people. So it's all about, to me, it's all about shifting our values from individualism and profit making to community and social values, to sustainability, to the future generations, and to marginalize, to an inclusive participatory approach. And that is in which we all belong. And I think that sort of the circle of life, which again is an indigenous concept, but it's indigenous to all of our cultures. If we go back, the partnership society, it's not this individualistic capitalist corporate thing. And now we've seen the excesses of it with the last couple of years and the collapses and the failures of it. So it's visioning what you want. So it's one thing to see the failures, it's another thing to say this is what we want and then how can we create it? And those are the strategies. So you're looking at vision, you're looking at analysis too of what is in the way of achieving that vision. I think it's really important to look at what are the barriers. So she's identifying banks, putting her money in the banks, that's a barrier. So strategy, spread the word and say everybody, hey, let's go to the credit unions, take their money. And so we know that can make change. So you want to think about the social issue that concerns you, whether it's military spending or a particular, because what's interesting about this actually is that it's about the paradigm shift. It is really about that paradigm shift that includes many issues together. And usually we have to go about campaigns on one issue at a time. So it's really great to see these things kind of being linked together. So, so you need analysis, you need vision, you need the strategies. And we were talking a bit about today is how some of that works in a successful social movement. According to Ursula Franklin, you must, in her book that she wrote about peacemaking, you must have a political outlet for your social change movement. So in other words, it's not enough to have a social change movement if nothing changes in the structure or in the government or in the institutions. If they don't change, then in the end you haven't achieved a change. And I guess that's what they're struggling with in Egypt right now, where they got rid of Mubarak, they got a military government, and that military government is now refusing to respond to the issues that are being brought to them. If they're going to create a new Egypt, they're probably going to have to do more. It's a thing that's never ending. And power, we talked about inner power, started with that. So we're talking a bit now about our kind of collective power, the power that we have together, so power with. And that's where that whole concept of 99, we are the 99%, the other 1%, how powerful that is. And the other is you know, the other system is operating from the value of power over, or dominance. So what we're doing is taking that and saying, no, we want power with, which again, with the movement right now, saying this is non-hierarchical. We want everybody to have a voice. We're using the community microphone or whatever it takes to make sure that everybody's voice can be included. It's a very powerful concept because it makes us all agents, it makes us all involved and responsible for what we live. It's not just we're going to sit around and complain, but actually we're going to take responsibility for what is and what changes we want to make. So coming back to, I gave you a case study, and because I want you to think about how does the analysis, vision, strategy approach work in the problem area. And we had picked, you know, if you look at militarism, one of the aspects of that like, I was just reading about what Harper's done, with the new guides for new immigrants to the country. They're going to have, there's at least 35 references to war in the little guidebook to Canada. There's nothing about peacekeeping has like one tiny reference. Like you just changed and militarized that entire thing. And you know now we're not going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars celebrating the War of 1812. And you know they actually had in that little guidebook the addresses for cadets and the addresses for the Army, like how to contact them. The only organizations listed with addresses in that thing. Yeah, it was just sent us yesterday, this information about this guide. I couldn't believe it. But, you know, part of the militarism is glorifying it, like, and an air show glorifies it. So there were a number of us over several years, Jim Loney, who's here today, was one of those people too, who went to Hamilton and protested their annual Father's Day air show because we wanted to do this thing, what I call a nonviolent dilemma, or contrasting values. We wanted to say, on Father's Day, it is not appropriate to celebrate planes, many of which are the military planes that have bombed countries. Okay? So, how do we go about raising that issue? And our goal really was to, I didn't even know that we'd be able to stop that air show, but after 3 years we did. It doesn't exist anymore, it doesn't happen. Anyway, so how did we do that? First of all, you have the vision that you want to put that message out to people. So we started with representation, so photos of what the damage causes. So people are faced with these planes that you're coming in, like they line up, you know, cars line up, thousands of cars line up to go into the air show. So along the route, the cars drive in, we put up the photo documents of people who've just been bombed, you know, to say these are the planes that are in this air show, called the war show. And I think the first 2 years it was just witness, people were present. But in between times, people were complaining to their counselors because there was a $100,000 grant every year to that Father's Day show from the city of Hamilton. They couldn't support the women's shelters, you know, for people who've been abused, or housing for the homeless, or you know the kinds of programs you need. But they gave $100,000 every year to that air show, and that was huge. So people were working on their counselors, they were writing letters to the editor. They were making it an issue. If you want to change something, it's got to have a buzz. So people were really talking about the issue. So it came back the second year, did another action. And then I got involved in the third year. And that third year, we actually had two pieces to it. One was outside, where we sat down, basically made it difficult for people to get into the air show. So we were told we'd be charged with trespass, and we were all carted away. But unbeknownst to those officers that arrested us there was another group inside the air show. Very dangerously, they were praying next door to a warthog plane. They had a side service, and they were remembering the victims and praying for peace. So you had, I think there were, you know, like 22 of us all together. It's not a huge number, is it? No, not really. But we were all arrested, carted away, and I have been arrested before and released immediately. This time we were not. And I have to say that ending up in the jail and the door clamped shut and you don't know when you're getting out and they're in charge of it, not you, is, you know, it's an experience where you just have to surrender. And part of that whole thing of being process of change is surrendering to you don't know exactly what is going to happen when you take that step. That if you know that what you're doing is right and what you've chosen, and that day I wore my Natassian t-shirt about the Innu women who sat on the runways to prevent the planes from landing. These were low-level flight tests in Utah that were ruining their lives.
Sorry, I just loved what you said, and to connect that with the education piece from before.
Yeah.
I think a lot about being wrong and what it means to be wrong, and I don't have a definition of what is true to me, so that's a very weird thing. But in school, they're teaching you to be right, are they not? They're not teaching you how to work with being wrong, or the techniques of going through it. And everything in society seems to me to be geared away from making mistakes or avoiding it at whatever cost.
So being cautious.
Yes, and what you just said reflected that perfectly.
Yeah.
So it just made me very happy.
Yes, they're taking the risk. Go ahead.
So to further what you're saying is in education now, they're actually allowing children to make mistakes. And they're allowing them, in math and in language, there is a process now, this 3-step process that teachers have to put the students through, where they are not taught, this is how you do this, and there it is. It takes days for the children to explore a concept, and they use all manner of manipulatives or whatever they have at their disposal. They're given all these tools, they're shown how to use the tools, and they make mistakes. And it's not until 3 or 4 days later. It takes forever. It seems like it takes forever, but it's allowing them to make mistakes. And then after 3 or 4 days, you finally get to how you actually work through all the ways you've explored. It all comes together. Everyone's learned different ways to make it work, and they learn how.
Yep.
And why brains it doesn't work, why it's not working.
Their brains are then readier to take in that knowledge and those concepts too.
Yeah. It's been hard for the teachers because we were all brought up this way, you know. This is how you do it, and if you don't get it right, well, you better learn.
You're going to be criticized and put down if you don't watch out.
So it's taking time for that to sit well with teachers, but they're learning it.
Yeah.
I'd like to contribute something on this too, because it's like, it's not only the idea that it's like, I enjoy what you said too, but
I love criticism.
Yeah. It's not even criticism, it's an addition, right? It's just like, it's further, okay. So not only is it wrong to be wrong, and it's better to be right, you know, but like what's so interesting is I've been exposed to the teachings of a woman named Pema Chodron, and she's written a whole book called Comfortable with Uncertainty, and it reflects to me like the values of what you were just talking about, and it's just so important in our society, right? It's like if we could develop skills in ourselves and resiliency in our society, that we could be comfortable and not totally freak out at the idea it's like, we don't know, this is uncomfortable, I'm not sure, and not push and struggle aggressively, right, for a resolution. But there's so much violence and aggression that could be averted, you know, at all levels, right? You know, like if we didn't feel the need to resolve it, you know?
Yeah. Sitting with the uncertainty and with uncomfortableness is important. And I want to also talk about moral courage and the cycle of moral courage. You just, you know that when there's violence and repression, that there's a silencing of voices, and you certainly see that, you know, where there have been the dirty wars and where people are rounded up and disappeared and so forth. The idea is to crush people, to silence people, to stop any dissent. And it has an effect, and it continues, and then the violence gets greater. So it's a kind of a cycle, downward cycle. What's true also is that there can be an upward cycle, and that's the cycle of moral courage, that when one person stands out. So the example here, the women in Natassinan, who many didn't even speak English, but they sat on that runway, they got taken to jails in Newfoundland, and they were not treated the way middle-class white women are treated. And they were in a court system they couldn't even understand, but they did it anyway because the survival of their communities was at stake. So they were willing to do it. I wore the t-shirt, I sat down, and we linked arms and we sang songs. Because again, songs. There's a beautiful movie called Soundtrack of a Revolution, which I really like to get and to show You know it?
Yes, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I got a copy of it.
You have it?
Yeah.
Fabulous. I'd like to do a film series, a Confernce film series, and so maybe we can all put that together as the outcome of our workshop today. Be something really good. Because it illustrates how that music gave them courage. Because in very great contrast to our very easy and comfortable direct action in Ottawa, which was fairly well choreographed, the police were on board, and it was all very smooth and easy. You know, if you watch the scenes, and we'll watch them a little bit later, some of those scenes, of the civil rights movement, you know, the dogs, the police, whatever, the crushing is very violent, very scary. So how do you deal with it? You build a sense of community, connection, and you sing. You sing is a way of bringing that moral courage forward that you need. You also need the symbols and expression of what you're doing. You have to show the contrast between the values that you're bringing to the issue at stake and what is going on there. For example, you remember the very same day they started bombing Serbia, there had been this massacre in a school in Colorado in the United States, and there was the president on TV castigating children for using violence. The very day they started bombing Syria. The contrast between what they say and what they do has to be shown, and so we have to be creative about the ways that we express that. So I've talked a little bit about the campaign, and there's more, sort of about thinking about that campaign here. But to go to the Gaza boat one, which is the one that I was most recently on, in the spring, Canada Boat to Gaza, I joined that campaign for several reasons. One of which was I wanted to support Palestinian nonviolent action because there's tons of it and we don't hear about it. And we don't hear about it until international people go and visit and then bring it home, and then it's maybe news. And maybe, that's right. And if Palestinians cannot get a message out through nonviolence, then what is left to them? What is left to them is only violence and suffering and terrible situations. The other reason is that it was a very creative action. I thought it had the potential to really raise the issue in a way that people could see, because as I would say something like, the power picture could be very evident. Okay, in other words, so when you do a big public demonstration or campaign, you are trying to get the public support. You very often you are not gearing your action at the people that you actually are approaching. Like we're maybe not really gearing our action at the Israelis when we went with that boat, but at public opinion around the world. So you're at that audience that you want to see and be moved and understand an issue. They don't know how many people know that there's a blockade of Gaza and that people are not getting what they need. They can't export, they can't import, they can't use their harbor. They're being crushed, they're being bombed, they're being, how many people know what they're actually living with? We wanted to show that through demonstrating the power picture. So we have to show that we're nonviolent. So again, they want to say we're a threat. They want to say that we might have weapons, or we do have weapons, or we're terrorists, or we're mass sympathizers. So the Israelis are launching their whole PR campaign about us. At the same time, threatening us in ways that raised the profile. And because we came along a year later after the flotilla where 9 people had been killed by the Israelis, there was a ton of media attention, and the media came with us on our boats. So it was a powerful action in that, here's our little boat, and we just have humanitarian supplies, and we just want to deliver to these people who need it, and they're being isolated and cut off from the world. And there are the Israelis turning us into this danger, this threat. And people look at it and they say, no, we're not the threat, we're not danger. That's what we needed people to do. So we tried very hard to get UN weapons inspectors or other weapons inspectors to come through our boat and see what we were carrying. So we had reporters, and they were kind of like our inspectors. We put the word out. And we got more coverage than I've ever gotten at any activist event, and I did put some of it in this little folder, so I'll pass it around. Just to show, and you can see the front picture is what we did with the boat when we went public. We actually were underground at first in our little village, trying to wait to get our permission to sail, which never came, as you know. And we did go out and sail anyway, so that was the direct action that we took. If we had time, we'll show you a little bit on the overhead of that campaign. So, you know, the vision is of breaking that blockade. Yeah.
I just wanted to say on that point, which I think is so brilliant and ties in with what I think of as Factor X. When you take direct action on any issue, it's about humility and not knowing what you're going to get down the road.
Yeah.
And of course, after that, we now, if you've been following what happened after the attempt to breach the blockade, we now have Turkey. Because then there was an investigation into the massacre of the Turkish citizens, and now Turkey is no longer supporting Israel, which is a huge political development in that whole scenario. And you couldn't, when you take your action, you can't foresee that development. And so I always, whatever I do now, I have my factor X and go, okay, you can't know this, I will leave, but it can
change the geopolitical situation quite dramatically. Yes. And I think the lengths to which Israel was prepared to go to the blockade became so weird because they had to export it to Europe. The very last day of our effort to go, when I actually flew home, there was a flotilla where people were flying into Tel Aviv to say, we have a right to go and visit Palestine. Because for years it's been, if you want to go to a Palestinian, you don't say that when you arrive in Tel Aviv, you say, I'm a tourist. I did that myself in 2004 to go and visit, but they wanted to have a day when everybody came and said, yes, I'm going to Palestine, visiting Palestinians, and it was a Welcome to Palestine week. And they went so far as to send a list of people to airports in Europe, so you don't let people get on planes. Israelis are exporting their anybody who dealt with that, and anywhere it was in the news, had to see the power picture and what Israelis were prepared to do. And just visiting Palestinians and families, some of their kids, we won't even let them in. A couple of people from our boat came to Gaza because we had Australians, Belgians, Danes, etc. on our boat. A couple of them from Australia went actually to that flotilla, and they did actually appeal their deportation and did actually get in. So we heard about their experience yet. But you know, there's a lot that can be done to challenge injustice and to do so in a creative and visible way. And yeah, you have to be willing to take a risk. So for example, if you go to get a criminal charge, you know, this may affect you in the future. If I cross the border, US, I crossed the border, but the guy said, your fingerprints on file, you know, so he wanted to know why my fingerprints on file. And I said, we were never convicted. This was the Hamilton Air Show. We were charged with criminal mischief because it turned out there were 2 groups, and so we were really dangerous. And so it wasn't trespass anymore, which they told us. It was now criminal charges. But we had a week-long trial, and we won that trial. And they never did that air show again. They said because insurance. Yes. So we were so scary that the insurance company upped the rate. The city cut their grant, and it wasn't economically feasible to do that in air show anymore. See, we subsidize militarism. You know that we subsidize militarism. So showing that that's not what we want to subsidize. What we want to subsidize is services for people, real people. Life, not death. Life, not death.
It seems like that's a very common thing. Is if what they care about is money. So if you get them where what they care about,
yes,
you immediately see change.
Exactly. It's the cost factor.
It's the cost factor.
And that's why
it's like, oh, if it's more cost effective to be green, they'll be green. If it's not cost effective to be green or get caught not being green, they won't change.
That's the way the corporate structure is trying to build. There's nothing like ethical business. It's not, which there could be. Why not? We can envision ethical business, and we could make it so. And we could change the culture that allows for people to go to work and do things they would never do in their personal life, but it's their job, and so they can't say anything, they can't do anything, they just ignore it, right? Or I just want to prove something, I can't change it. A lot of the companies will say, well, if we stop doing the oil exploitation or whatever in this country, well, some other company will do it, so better ask them that. So, so there's many justifications, and saying no, there's a whole different paradigm of sustainability, and not just the green, what's called greenwash, but real.
To circle back to unexpected consequence, also, I think that the Canadian vote to Gaza and the flotilla certainly raised public awareness. I was in Egypt at the end of August, and it was quite fascinating because people were wandering around going, we think it's cool, we're pretty sure it's cool, but we're not entirely sure what it is that we've done here. And there was an incident on the border between Gaza and Sinai. Just the week before I was there was heavy military action. And it wasn't clear at one point whether I was actually going to be able to get to where I was going, down in the south of Sinai. But as a result, I believe, of raising the awareness of the Turkish government's movement, the Israeli government actually apologized to Egypt for having killed 6 Egyptian soldiers in these very confusing border incursions. We will not try to define them too closely. And I don't think that would have happened.
I maybe have learned that they have to apologize. This is the Turkish thing.
Right.
They say, do not apologize for these 9 people died. Well, your ambassador can just go home now. And they've also said they won't let them be the bully of the Eastern Mediterranean and that they will accompany aid boats.
Absolutely. So as a result, I believe, as a result of this, there was immediate accountability taken on the part of the Israelis. And I think that that apology may have actually helped to dissipate some of the hostility that was starting to grow in Egypt. It was quite fascinating to watch. Both people's like, I don't know what happens next. Do you know what happens next? And the certainty that if certain things did not happen, there would be very real tangible consequences.
Okay, so I wanted to, give you a certain number of concepts or thoughts right now. I would like to hear your ideas too about the concepts tonight. How many people are going to see the film tonight?
Yeah.
Everybody, pretty much? Good. I think it's going to be really fabulous. But from the little trailer, you can see they've talked about some of the aspects of the nonviolent social movement. And I will say that I'm really glad there's a new movie coming out. These are the movies that we've been using up till now. Bringing Down a Dictator, which is about the bringing out of Milosevic, which 1 year campaign they brought down that dictator. Because again, people were ready, but it was a youth movement, and they had money. They were American sources that gave the money, so it's a lot easier to have your revolution. It's a lot easier to have your revolution if the U.S. wants to give you permission to have your revolution. If they would like you to have it. But anyway, they still couldn't have done it without all the creative actions that they did in there, which you can see. And then this one, of course, more powerful, which will is 6 25-minute stories. 3 of them fairly well known, but not the detail that they go into here, not the strategic thinking they go into here. Like it's the Assault March, the Nashville Lunch and Resistance as part of the Civil Rights Movement, and it's the ending of the part of South Africa. That's it on disc 1, and disc 2 is the Danish resistance to the Nazis in World War II, and then Solidarity in Poland, and then the last one is how the Chileans did get rid of Pinochet, the dictator. We don't know the story, we don't hear the story, but how did they do it? They non-violently got rid of the dictator. And so it's a fabulous series, and we watch them all, pretty much all of them, when we do the 6-week training, but we can do this one piece of them today. It's a power saving thing. It turns itself off every once in a while. Okay, so any thoughts so far about the concepts that we've had? So I've talked about a power picture, analysis, vision, strategy, the nonviolent dilemma that you want to create. Like the nonviolent dilemma we created was Israel had a choice how to respond to us. We said we're very open. So that's another quality of these things is it's not clandestine and based on surprise. It's open. We planned it for a long time, and people knew we were coming. And Israel had a choice how to respond to us. They could either say, okay, right, we know that these people at least are having, are no threat to us. They're just bringing supplies, and we'll let them go through. We're not giving up our blockade, they could have said, but these people we know and trust, so that's all right. Or, if there's certain inspections done, we can trust them. They could have done that kind of thing. Or they could say, you can't come, you know, we're going to use dogs, we're going to use tear gas, we're going to use whatever we want to stop you because we are going to stop you forcibly going, and thus use their power over their very powerful kind of military forces to stop us. And that is what they said, that's the route they decided to take. But they had that choice. So we create that dilemma. They have to choose, they have to respond. And then the public, the people that we're actually looking at, can look at that and they can see what the power picture is, and they can, people will side with the underdog, right? We're going to side. The 99% of us are going to side with those people who are being treated unfairly because we have values of fairness and equity and sharing and compassion, and we don't believe in slavery, we don't believe in total exploitation, and we do care about the future. We do realize we have common values. Voice of Women for very many years challenged the Cold War notion that the Russians were the enemy, and they talked about communist babies' diapers would be very different from baby diapers here, and that mothers had to deal with it too. So they had a lot more in common with them than not, and organized visits. So just the diplomacy, citizens' diplomacy was huge in bringing to an end that threat that Cam was talking about earlier, that nuclear threat. And it's not the end, there's still a threat of nuclear weapons until they are abolished, and that's something we've been happening right now too. But it really de-escalated the trigger. Hi, Wendy. So, so those concepts that we've had so far, any comments or questions on those concepts? Yes. Would you now go out and apply them?
Yeah, I just have a question about your Hamilton situation, because that's been something maybe we've all been concerned about over the years. Was there anything, because of course the shows take place across...
is obviously a big one.
Well,
taking that one on.
Trenton and Toronto, and so I just wondered if there was anything national that came out of that, or to take that success and try and tackle some of the other shows.
Not that I know of. And one of the things I want to do is bring success stories up more visibly so that people can see them and build on them. There are enormous success stories. People in Scotland stopped flights. They got interfered with the flights, the supplies that were going to Israel during the Gaza war. They actually got on the runways and stopped those planes from going, and they were charged and arrested, and they had a jury trial, and they were found innocent because they were acquitted because they had been trying to prevent immediate harm to others by getting up there on the runways. So, they're saying no, protecting people is more important than letting these military planes just come and go and take these supplies. But how many people know that story? We need to spread those stories, so we need to have a place on our website that says these are successes that have happened. I know that center in Portugal is putting together success stories on their website.
It's also the Scottish the airfield from which many of those flights, one of the many reasons would have been done, is right where Fincorn is, and they're actually closing the airfield. Years after Fincorn took up residence.
And Greenland Common was a successful struggle, which was closed as a military base and restored as a community commons after, I don't know, 20-year struggle, something like that. There's another little video about that too.
I'm finding that the hardest thing to do when faced with an opponent or whatever it is you're facing, some kind of opposition, is exactly this. Make your audience, whoever it is, let them know that you are trying to communicate with them and not the person you're dealing with directly. You're trying to get cause and effect and get a reaction from them rather than... And I think no one really views things in terms of cause and effect and effect and effect and the chain of action and how things build upon each other. It's just this individual instance. So I was just wondering if you had any colorful examples or anything.
Okay, well, I want to give you one example because I wanted to talk about building allies. So remember we talked about a campaign is not an event. We're very good at having events. Well, let's have an event for this day. Let's have an event for that day. I do it myself, right? I know. But the question's got to be, why this event at this time, and what will it build to, what will it lead to later? If you look at the dump site 41 struggle here in Ontario, I think they knew for like 20 years they were slated for a dump site, and the farmers in the area were really not happy about that for a really long time, and they tried to bring it up, So it didn't change until a bunch of Indigenous women came down from who lived around Georgian Bay area. They came to that site and held a weekend, and they had a fire, and they had lots of talks, etc. And at the end of the weekend, it came time to like put out the fire, but they didn't put out the fire because the fire wasn't ready to put out. That's how they read it. The fire wanted to stay. So they didn't stay, and it became an encampment. It became an occupation. And this was on a farmer's field opposite the site, for dump site 41, where work had already begun on escalating. It had already begun dumping out tons of water and all kinds of stuff, so they were really pretty far along. So they started that occupation, and then people started to come and join. And then allies began arriving, and it's very important to get allies. So the Council of Canadians was a huge ally that they got. You know, David Crombie writing an article in the Star was really big at reaching out exactly to that wider audience of the middle of the road people that you've got to look at and say, hey folks, isn't water more important than someplace to dump the garbage, you know? And ultimately they had to change. They had to know who they had to change in order for the decision to be reversed. And that was, they had to change their old town council. So what is influencing the town council? Well, in the end, there was enough pressure on the town council that they finally didn't give the permits or rescinded the permits. I'm not exactly sure, but that's the people who made the decision. Other decisions have ended up at the provincial level. Like the Spadina Expressway was stopped by people getting out on and in front of the bulldozers and building up such pressure. So you get out in front of the bulldozers, well, that's news. So that's when we need our mainstream news and our alternative news to get the word out. Sometimes the alternative news will do so when mainstream news hasn't decided it's a story yet. So, but anyway, Spadina Expressway, Jane Jacobs, and all the people who sat out there made that a huge public issue. And in the end, the provincial government pulled the plug and said we're not going to build that. But he could have been the OMB, and I don't think it was the OMB that did it. I think Dick Davis, who was premier at the time, was responsible for that. So ultimately, you've got to have a decision maker. You'll see if you look at a little section of the video how that works in the case of the Nashville bunch of was shown. So nuclear weapons, you know, huge issue. You've got to think about where to do it. You've got to have your campaigns in different countries. For the part of the peace campaign, you need to have your campaigns in different countries going on. You have your campaigns here, and they need to go beyond the usual suspects. We need to have a strategy for reaching out, and you can do that. You don't always have to do it in a dramatic way. You can do it by going out and having a booth here, there, and everywhere, and talking to people, and just gradually building up your list, because big email lists are very important and very valuable. They can be mobilized. You can see that with Avaz, their petition campaigns, and Lead Now is trying to do that here in Canada. And so to try and engage those people who won't actually come out on the street with us, but who do agree with us and will do some little action. So getting the entire range of actions from clicking on your computer to sign a petition to getting out on the street and being prepared to be arrested or even killed for what they do. Because that does happen. You see it in these revolutions that people do die, just not as many as in the violent revolutions, and they die in a way that actually generally emboldens and inspires people to carry on.
And in regard to something like nuclear, where a lot of people may not think it affects them, they think, well, we have electricity, it doesn't seem to be polluting, and they don't hear about all the ins and outs of cradle-to-grave type operations of nuclear industry. But when it impacts them, I saw it a few years ago when it was a anti-nuke campaign. It was at Queen's Park, and the people that were there were people of Toronto who have, the people who of certain privilege who have cottages up north, and it was then impacting their land.
This is the uranium mining?
The uranium mining, yes. So it was impacting them finally. And I saw these people who, from Leaside, from community that my kids went to school in, and there they were. Wow, here you guys are here. Finally, you guys are getting it. But it was impacting their cottage property.
Yeah.
And so that's when when it starts impacting people in a broader sense, like the food up in the quarry.
Yeah.
How that is now reaching out to people. and that's become a huge
Yeah.
campaign.
So their slogan being, saving the land that feeds us.
Yes,
right?
taters, not craters.
Taters, not graders, exactly. So finding those the creative ways to express your grief with the old soundbite method, you know, is so important. So that kind of slogan and concept that turns things around for people. Maybe you can think of another, give some other examples. But right now, because we've been sitting for a long time, I'm just going to give you the chance to get up and around the room and find somebody you haven't talked to yet this morning and share with them something you've learned so far this morning or something you're reflecting on so far this morning. And then come and sit down again. Okay, we get all this time all the time on MPs, and there's actually now somebody who left the Sudbury region of Manitoba who is now new conservative MP who was working in the arms industry, right? They just go around and around. And unless we expose that and we stop that, and like we can only do that through citizen lobbying. There are some good people in Parliament, we know that. Jack Layton was sort of the the example that brought us all together to realize that politics doesn't always have to be bad. They make changes that way too. And as he said, never let them tell you it can't be done. And he was instrumental in stopping the Adam's mine, so that's another campaign that we did locally. A lot of these local campaigns. Again, they got a lot of insurance. Like, who was going to insure potential damage to the water supply in the Adam's mine? Well, it turned out that people wanted it all. People wanted the insurance, so that killed the deal. But politics, the lobbying is so extremely important that we have to find our allies, and we talked about allies before, in Parliament as well. And right now, when we don't have the majority of members, our people are with our values, and the other side does, it's very important to build our connections so that come the next election, that's going to shift. Or even before that, it might influence some things. But then we have to expose to people what our government is actually doing. If people don't know that they've cut 300 scientists from Environment Canada, that they now need funding to the Environmental Network, that they're blocking this important treaty, that they're getting in the way of nuclear abolition, they're just doing everything bad. People have to know it. Beyond this, as I view it, 60% of Canadians voted against the war, prisons, corporate agenda. 40% of those who voted for that, not most of them not knowing really that they were voting for the war, prisons, corporate agenda. I don't think most of them knew. They just thought they were voting for stability and economy and business. So they, what we need is for that number to be 70% who know that they're why not to support and will not support a war, prisons, corporate agenda. But they know there's an alternative vision. So we have to reach out beyond the usual suspects, which is why demonstrations in the Occupy Toronto movement and so forth is so important, because it's telling people, no, there's a whole other way of looking at things. And lobbying, going up and actually talking to our MPs is so important. Citizens Climate Lobby is doing an absolutely fabulous job on the climate issue, bringing forth a bill that they think people will, they can build momentum and people will support it ultimately. And they've got the timeline and the goal, and they know when decisions are being made at that level, interprovincially and federally, to try and get it's called fee and dividend. So fee for carbon use and a dividend goes out to the population to benefit you because this fee is being charged on carbon use. So they're working on that, and the peace lobby through the carbon piece is another example. And for that, the effort is to get 10,000 signatures on a petition saying we want to see a carbon piece, we want to rapidly rebuild peace. So I'm going to pass that around along with the sign-up list, because this is not a sign-up list to get informed of anything coming ahead. That's simply to be submitted to Parliament. But this one is, if you don't already get peace notes from these groups, if you want to, it's peace events and actions and stuff like that, and you can sign up. So I'll start it over here.
I did already.
You did it. You get it already. I've got you, Victor. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
On the list.
Then I'm just wondering about the workers who are actually engaged, in building arms, that go to the factories every day, that are part of the 99% of us that are earning their living doing this. I'm just wondering what's been done to work or to approach it from the point of view of the people who are having, and what a toll that must take on their spirit to be actually engaged in this and probably feel they have no alternative that can feed their families. So
Well, I think that with a lot of this stuff, what's been done is very spotty. There is some work, but it's not like the level we need. We're like we're doing the pilot study, but we haven't done the real push.
There's a show on CBC, I forget what channel it is, but The Great Canadian Tradition. I turned it on the other day, and apparently it's been running for years. And it's a hunting show, and this is on prime time television on Friday. And it doesn't occur to me that I don't associate being Canadian with hunting, but it's there. I think there's such action in the cities and
the right wing knows how to create this. Look at the Highway of Heroes, right? Like they're now doing this celebration of War of 1812. Like they know how to do that. We need to find our ways. So I would like to have something, for example, either an event or a symbol. Like the railway workers, the Chinese railway workers have a memorial down at Spadina and Front, that area. But down there they have a memorial because those people got together and said we need to remember these people. If all we have is more memorials commemorating soldiers, because the whole reason for the White Poppy campaign, white poppies to represent civilians, so everyone's that's all suffering from war, not to negate the red poppy, but to say there's also more suffering and we need to end war. To remember is to end all war, that phrase and that concept. Change, as we call it, the framing of the issues. And they want to hold the frame, and they have a lot of people who hold a certain kind of frame, but we want to shift that frame.
Yeah, I just find it ironic that, just thinking about poppies now, that poppies are being used for this sort of remembering the dead and perhaps peace, and peace with poppies being part of the problem with wars, that they are being fought over.
That's true.
So I know when they, on the Friday nights when Barry Weislinger has his films, Rebel Films have it here, and they have a white poppy sitting there, I went, huh, isn't that interesting? When it became a white poppy, it just sort of highlighted to me that, oh, well this is why many wars are being fought over. It's the oil, it's the resources of that land, the oil, the opium. Maybe a different flower would be better, I don't know.
I talked to, I was flying back from Iceland in the spring and sat beside, I think he was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who was just coming back from deployment at Camp Mirage. And his impression of Canadian work in Afghanistan was absolutely fascinating. He said it's completely, he didn't say it's completely useless because he was in public, but he just said we're spending our money on the wrong things. That trying to train an Afghan police force with farmers who just want to go back to their fields is absurdity. We should be spending the money on buying the opium crops, paying the farmers, and then supporting them to grow different crops. And he said, cost effectively, that would make so much sense economically because the money that we're spending on all of this stuff isn't working. We're just going to keep spending that money. We buy one heroin crop. That gives us, we burn it, we dispose of it, however, and that gives us the freedom then to start supporting. Or to, I'm not sure how that works, but then use that to fund getting people who don't want to be soldiers, they want to be farmers, helping them to actually farm something that's less ridiculous.
Something that made me very angry that I heard recently, and I would do something about it. Again, it's this whole thing of mobilizing more people so we can do more. That is now stopping the aid project. So now that our soldiers are gone, we're going to stop our aid from the Afghanistan too. It's just a fig leaf to cover the military operations. It always was anyway. But to know that they're just going to cut any project that might be helping civilians is just, it's criminal. It really is criminal. We have to redefine again what criminal is.
Actually, it's sad because it's a Hollywood movie and they didn't really give enough time and attention to it. But at the end of the Charlie Wilson's War movie, where they talked about the U.S. funding of that and insurgents against the Russians. There's a scene towards the end, and I actually wish that they spent just as much time on this as they did about funding, where Charlie Wilson talks to them about how now that
we used, like we've helped funded this resistance against the Russians, we need to spend as much money rebuilding the society, or if we pull out now after, you know, the old regime is gone and a lot of the system has been broken, all you're going to have is hungry, broken children and anger that's going to come back, and led up to this war, and it just seems to be the same cycle. It's like the exact same.
Why
thing
do we
that
create
happened.
the conditions for future wars? Exactly, and we're setting those conditions in place now. There are estimates that between 2050 and 2100, the effects of climate change will be such that the Earth's carrying capacity, that is ability to feed, will go from 7 billion that we have now and the 9 billion that we might have by 2050 to 1 billion. So it will be a holocaust that we've never seen, and the planet will not look like anything we've ever known unless we change it now. And when I've seen the projections of if we stop the carbon use now and if we cut it now, and I mean, I started seeing these 5-6 years ago of the impact over 200 years is absolutely huge if we do it now and not wait until we've run out of oil. If we run out of oil, it's too late. So to try and stop using something that we want to use as a society before we actually run out of it is a huge challenge for us. So we really have to change the way people think and what they know.
And I think another aspect of when people go to wars or after wars, I think the one thing that never is mentioned is, and it should be, is if we're going to start a war, what is the cost to rebuild afterwards? Like that is something that never gets brought up, but it's like, and actually one thing that made me really sad was when September 11th happened and they were talking about restructuring the budget, they got rid of, the Americans actually did have within the Pentagon Society for Restructuring and Building Peaceful Communities, and they got rid of it in terms of
the peace, what that was called.
And it was like the one organization the military had that actually focused on, we're not like, and it's like, what are we doing? Like, we're not really authentically thinking about it.
And so you can build momentum to change that. One more comment and then we're going to watch it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was, he was there. Marta? Yeah, when she was talking about being on the air flight back from Iceland and being next to the Brigadier General, whoever that was. And him talking about how we shouldn't be putting money into keeping those, that system, the opium set up there, or we should be maybe helping them to develop, putting money into them developing their own farming. Well, they have their own farming. If they would just be allowed to, they would have sustainable farming for sustenance. You don't have to, keep paying money into Monsanto for the seeds. If you seed the plant, you just plant your seeds over and over again. You have your plants, and you are sustainable. So thinking that we need to put money into that, we don't need to put money into that.
Yeah, but
money into what's happening here in Canada.
Yeah, we need to work here in Canada.
Yeah.
But also over there, sometimes there's gaps, like there are local transportation gaps, or women's groups need funding, or whatever. There's little things, but we need to look at what is effective and what is needed, and not make the assumption that we need to fix everything for them, because that's the point you're making money to. So I'm just going to show you a couple of little quick clips, and then we'll talk a little bit about the.
Our past is pretty bloody and heinous, and we would like to evolve out of it. And this is one of the ways that we can, by joining with other people who see the world similarly to us. I grew up in the South, and 50 years ago, there was hardcore segregation, very similar to what is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. And we prayed for people to come to us. We prayed for people to break through the Klan, the racist police, the white citizens councils. We prayed for people to come and illustrate to the rest of the world what we suffered every single day. So I see this venture as a continuation of the civil rights struggle, and I see it as a continuation especially of the freedom rides. This is the freedom ride of this era. To get on this boat, make it to Gaza, make it to the West Bank, and understand your political lineage, which is to oppose with every drop of your blood this kind of oppression to anybody, anywhere on earth. It isn't right, and those of us who have already been through these struggles, and actually won a few of them, have an obligation to go and see where the same thing is happening to people, to join our stories to their stories, and to encourage them, especially the youth, to know that these oppressions can be ended, and that it may take the rest of our lives, but we're here to start.
We shall live in peace. We shall.
Just wanted to show you that little clip. Because Alice Walker was one of the people that was on the U.S. boat. And I got to meet those U.S. Boat folks when I was in Athens, before we went to Crete, before we tried to get our Canadian boat out. We were very lucky to have Bob Lovelace on our boat too, and he speak about colonization issues here. You know, some amazing people were on the boat, part of this project. Here's what happened, just so you see, sort of, this was our direct action piece. Oops, sorry.
The Greek Coast Guard gives chase to the Tahrir, the Canadian boat in the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. It's made a bid for freedom just days after the Greek government officially announced it was enforcing Israel's blockade on Gaza. Two of the activists stayed behind to block the path of the Coast Guard and give the Tahrir a head start. But the attempt to outrun the Greek military came to an end as soldiers on speedboats boarded the vessel 8 nautical miles from its starting point before it could reach international waters. The organisers of this boat had said that with or without the legal permission to do so, they would try and set sail to Gaza, and the Greek authorities said that they would try and stop them, and they have done so. The Greek Coast Guard has boarded this ship and is now sailing it back to Greek shores. Some on the Tahrir were pushed to the ground when they attempted to resist the boarding, but not a single shot was fired, and some of the soldiers even seemed apologetic for carrying out their orders. But questions remain over the legality of the Greek government's decision to trap the Freedom Flotilla, including foreign-flagged boats and ships on its shores.
If somebody takes away a permission that they're not allowed to take, we shouldn't just stay there. We have the right to go. That's why we left.
This is certainly outrageous. It's our boat. It's not even a Greek-flagged vessel. And what has happened is the Greek authorities have physically extended the blockade of Gaza to Greece.
It's very clear from the behaviour of the military that the people of Greece are with us. They just were very careful not to hurt us, and they were saying they were just carrying out orders.
I feel sad that we couldn't challenge the illegal blockade of Gaza to open up Gaza to the rest of the world and to end this brutality and to end this open-air prison situation that continues to exist, but it's only a matter of time. So if we didn't get there on this path, we're a step in the road and we're a stone in the past.
Passengers say their boat was damaged when the authorities manoeuvred it back into the dock, and they say they're fighting for it to be repaired. And ultimately, the Freedom Flotilla is still fighting for the right to sail to Gaza.
The other campaigns know what we're doing. Some of them, they may try to make a move. This isn't about one boat going to Gaza, this is about a flotilla. The overall destination is still freedom for the Palestinians of Gaza, and our course is still the conscience of humanity.
3 activists who were not on board during the interception have been arrested and charged. The remaining passengers have spent the night on board the ship under the watch of the local police and military, and are refusing to leave the boat in fear of also being arrested and having their vessel seized. 1 year ago, the Greek authorities cooperated as ships left from Greece to join the first Freedom Flotilla, including 1 vessel which left from this very port. Today the landscape is very different, and the Greek government has, in clear opposition to the wishes of its people, made Greece the new front line in Israel's blockade of Gaza. Hassan Ghani, Press TV, on board the Tahrir in Agios Nikolaos, Greece.
So those are just 2 little clips about the Gaza boat. And so did you notice the little kayaks? In front of the, yeah, so that's creativity applied, right? Because they were watching us all the time with this Coast Guard boat, so we didn't know how we had to back up to get out of the in order to make our escape bid to get out of the harbor, and we didn't know how we were going to be able to back up. They were, you know, right on our tail there with the nose of their boat, and they were there all the time. So the little kayaks kept them from being moved because a motorized boat cannot cross the path of a non-motorized boat because it's too dangerous. So they had to deal with the kayakers before they could chase us. Anyways, we did our bit, and I think it's also an example of where on the surface it doesn't look like we won. We didn't get our humanitarian aid to Gaza, but we did advance the cause. We did make our points, and we did perhaps even more powerfully than if we'd just been able to sail in and do them and have no problems with it. We made the point about the blockade. Any comments or questions on that?
Did the aid get through somehow through another boat?
Watch the news. There will be another attempt. Hopefully they'll get covered on the news because we still have a boat and we still have the aid.
Okay.
And it should get through. So.
What passed through my mind at the time was how much Israel was paying Greece government to...
They want to be involved in a pipeline deal to do with natural gas under the Mediterranean Sea. So the Greeks are wanting to do that. Plus the Greeks were under total pressure, economically they still are, over this threat of bankruptcy. So like the human rights goes way down the list when there's an economic pressure and also political pressure. Apparently Netanyahu, like we're talking about building allies, right? Netanyahu was busy building his allies with Papandreou all this past year, courting him and being nice to him and everything. So we, since 2008, boats have left from Crete for this, and in 2008 the first boats were successful in delivering their aid. The Israelis didn't stop them. And the captain, who was supposed to be captain of our boat this year, had been on one of those successful missions and had been made a citizen of Gaza honorary and so forth. And he really wanted to do it again. But, they had done that for 3 years, they had let boats sail. And then when we got there, this year, under this pressure and this mission, they stopped us. So, but, we still made it by not accepting that, by challenging it and taking the boat and making our sail anyway. We couldn't take our Greek crew, they couldn't pilot it, but we had people in our passenger list, our delegate list, who knew how to steer the boat, how to manage the engine, how to do the navigation. We could have gone all the way to Gaza with people in our crew, in our delegation. So that's that one. Now, do we have till 12:30? We do, don't we?
Yeah.
We do. Because I was going to show you the section of Force More Powerful that has to do with the Nashville Lunch County citizens, because it shows you how they built a campaign actually in less than a year to desegregate these Lunch County citizens. So, and before we do, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering if there was any time at all to show both that and the Poland section. The reason I'm asking about that is because Lech Walesa that just came out as supporting Occupy Wall Street, and is going to be visiting there soon. I wanted to, frankly, refresh my memory around the solidarity struggle, because obviously it's so interesting, because he's like one of the best-known anti-communists.
Let me ask you, would you rather see the Lech Walesa section and not the civil rights section? Perhaps you'd like to see that one. Would you?
I mean, I'm just wondering if it's possible to read both in the time we have.
No. Well, unless you watch part of each. But
the civil section is the black community goes to the restaurants. I saw the documentary. Which one is?
Yeah, maybe you've seen that one. I think maybe then we'll show
the
very good because people might not have seen that one.
So which film is that?
This is a solidarity struggle in Poland. This one, Force More Powerful, has 6 segments, and the Lech Walesa solidarity struggle is not as well known. So maybe we'll try that one. Let me see. I'm going to change this and find it. The magic of technology. Is it? The thing I like about the Nashville Lunch County Students one is that there's several turning points that you see as it goes through the story that I can just as easily tell you. They also show the training, and the training is really quite extreme. They show these people putting up with incredible kind of abuse by volunteers who are acting like nasty local citizens to give them a sense of what might happen to them and what did happen to them. So seeing that prepared, seeing them build the protest over time, their dress code that they had, because they didn't want people to think dirty Negro. They wanted them to see dignity, they want to have the dignity and show them that here dignified citizens being denied. At first, the mayor said he supported law and order, but of course there was no law that they were breaking, and it was just a convention, that the segregation was really just a convention at that point, and the order was being broken by the thugs that were beating them up, and they were not charging the thugs. So it was a total contradiction, what people think is law and order from what he thought was law and order from what was really happening. And in the end, there's a bombing of the lawyer's house, and they used that moment to then do a march to City Hall, and at that march, one of the young women asks the mayor, do you think it's right to deny a person the opportunity to eat simply on the basis of their color? And he said, no, I don't believe it's right. And so that was public and recorded on television, and that was really, but there's also boycotting, there's also other things in there. So it's a very nice demonstration of what's involved. But let's see if we can find, I'll do my very best to find the right episode on here. These things are.
Confined within the walls of a South African jail, the young lawyer from India found no reason to complain.
Some say that jail is a palace.
Yeah, but I think it's, you
Others
click on
look upon it as
chapters,
a
you
beautiful
kind of look
God.
for chapters.
Some others hold that through the jail gates we shall pass from.
Oh, wrong menu, sorry.
Yeah, you gotta go there and then you choose the episode, I think.
It's
try going to DVD down on the play bars.
Oh, at the very bottom.
Yeah, on the bottom.
Very bottom.
Just go here.
Yeah.
Press here.
Confined within the walls of a South African jail,
I'm trying to look through
the
the
young lawyer
chapters.
from India found no reason to complain.
Some say that jail is a palace.
But I think it's
Others look upon it as a beautiful God. Some others hold that through the jail
chapters
gates
are supposed to come up.
we shall pass from our present bondage to freedom.
Let's go here, DVD fiction.
The year was 1907.
Titles.
Yeah, the title menu went
The
right
young
back.
lawyer from India was
One of them says chapters.
Yeah.
Gandhi led the views in a non-violent struggle.
You see the view there?
We'll try next.
14-year-old.
Here we go. This is it.
This is important.
This is called the experimental method. We got it. So that's it.
Okay, polish. Ya, yo ya. Siguiente question. Siguiente respuesta. Bueno, te puedo pasar el link de torrent y lo bajas.
It was the right atmosphere for a strike. Before 6 a.m. we started distributing the leaflets. At any moment, I could have been stopped and arrested. So, obviously, I was afraid.
Workers at the Lenin shipyard in Gdansk are angry enough to strike. Angry at recent price increases and the filing of a popular co-worker. But only a few realize their strike will pit them against the full force of the communist government in Poland.
People started yelling, "Open the gate, we're going downtown to the regional Communist Party headquarters." Then we knew we had to start singing the national anthem. That would calm people down. We're not going to make the mistake of 1970, when we went into the streets and tanks rolled over us.
Every worker in Poland knows the story of December 1970. Strikers left the shipyard and marched on Communist Party headquarters. 6 were killed and 300 injured. They learned the futility of taking on armed troops in the street. One of them was a 27-year-old shipyard electrician named Lech Wałęsa. He was fired for union activism in 1976. But now, in 1980, he has returned to help organize the strike.
Ja przez te 10 lat od...
During those 10 years since 1970, when I was a leader in the same shipyard, I had been thinking where mistakes have been made. And if fate gave me a chance to lead again, how would I do it?
This time, Confernce and other strike leaders have planned carefully. Confernce is known and liked by many at the shipyard. He announces, "We will occupy the shipyard. I'll be the last to leave." Their strike will be strictly non-violent. The government will have no excuse to begin shooting. The strike committee commandeers a cafeteria in Confernce's old department. Their first step is to make sure news of the strike is not suppressed by the regime. Alina Piankowska, a shipyard nurse, telephones Jacek Kuron at the Workers' Defense Committee in Warsaw, who will pass the news to Radio Free Europe and the BBC.
Thanks to that, the world could hear about us. Not only the world, also the families of the Gdańsk shipyard workers learned that way why their husbands or fathers or sons didn't come home at the regular time. And this phone call caused people to get organized in the city of Gdańsk.
On Friday morning, the strike has widened. Public transportation has stopped, the port is closed, and 22 factories are on strike, 50,000 workers in all. Government has cut phone lines to the rest of Poland for fear the strikes will spread. But it's too late. All over Poland, people know about the Gdansk strike. In the cafeteria, the strike committee hammers out a list of demands. They prepare leaflets for the striking workers. At the top of the list is the right to free and independent unions and the right to strike. Unprecedented rights that Poland's communist regime will surely resist. On Saturday, the shipyard director has received orders from his Communist Party superiors and is ready to begin negotiating. The shipyard offers generous wage increases and better working conditions, everything but independent unions. But when the vote is taken, management has packed the committee with party officials. The terms are accepted and workers begin going home. As thousands head for the gate, Anna Valentinovich, recently fired but now reinstated by the strike agreement, reminds them that their settlement has abandoned other workers who have joined the strike.
What about those who supported us? There were 40 factories. What about these people? I felt ashamed and hopeless. What should we do?
Alina Piankowska, the nurse, runs to the main gate and tries to stop the workers. A small crowd gathers to listen as she pleads with them to stay.
If we really want free trade unions, if we really want any influence on management, we should act in solidarity with the others, that is, to continue the strike.
Thousands have gone home, but a few hundred are persuaded by Alina's argument. They will stay the night to keep the strike alive. During that night, they take a fateful decision to form an inter-factory strike committee to represent all workers in all of Poland. This committee will magnify their force 1,000 times and create a base of popular power never before seen in communist Poland. On Sunday morning, workers improvise a Catholic Mass inside the main gate. Thousands of townspeople gather outside. The gate is decorated with flowers, messages of support, and a photograph of the Pope, who is Polish. It's an unexpected show of support for the strikers.
I had never expected that, such a reaction from the citizens of Gdańsk. It gave me a lot of courage and energy to act, because I realized that we were probably going to be able to achieve something.
The Inter-Factory Strike Committee has published 21 demands, a document that has galvanized workers in other cities. One of them is a 27-year-old electrician at a tractor factory near Warsaw, Zbigniew Bujak.
Suddenly we learned about the strike in Gdansk. We read the 21 demands. And as we say in Poland, we felt, literally speaking, like we caught God by the arm. We suddenly felt that we had in our hands a tool, which, if we don't make a mistake, must produce some wonderful fruit.
In Gdansk, the strikers who spent the weekend inside the shipyard have been rewarded. 15,000 workers now return and rejoin the strike. The Inter-Factory Strike Committee waits for a response to the 21 demands. While they wait, more factories join the strike. They steadily gain leverage over a system that has never permitted the existence of a power separate from the Communist Party. Everywhere, workers follow the example set in Gdansk, reducing risk by staying inside their workplaces.
We are not going out of the gate, because then it is very easy for the authorities to provoke. Simply provoke and then introduce police and the military. So we wanted to avoid that. We knew about the activities of Gandhi, for example, or what Martin Luther King did. And we knew that these people, building a theory of non-violent resistance, they won.
The second week begins. Strikers are publishing a daily bulletin called Solidarity and making preparations for a long struggle.
Well, you could say that inside the shipyard there was a second government of Poland. We had a sense of humor about it. We had the Minister of Communication, the Minister of Social Welfare and Salaries, who gathered money. There was a Minister of Finance who kept the money we gathered from various companies that were coming here. There was a Minister of Security who was responsible for all the security guards, defense of the fences, and the food. Everything worked like clockwork, like a Swiss watch.
Their patience has given them strength. By the 9th day, the Inter-Factory Strike Committee speaks for nearly 500,000 workers in 370 factories in every industry and region of Poland. Government negotiators arrive at the shipyard. The long stalemate appears to be over. Jerzy Kolodziejski, provincial governor of Gdansk, was on the negotiating team.
Some people were clapping, happy that here is the authorities, the province governor, entering the shipyard, starting the negotiations. Others were swearing, booing, and calling names. I had no doubt I was going to be the sacrificial lamb.
Workers demand that all discussions be broadcast over shipyard loudspeakers. Polish news media must be allowed to cover the strike and talks. The government has come to the bargaining table after 10 days of stalling.
Wszystko spaliło na panewce. It all backfired. It turned out that these 10 days were used by the strikers to strengthen organizationally, to strengthen the Inter-Factory Strike Committee, and to convince people that without negotiations with the committee, an end to the conflict is impossible.
Mieczysław Jagielski, Poland's first deputy prime minister, faces Lech Wałęsa, a 37-year-old electrician. Jagielski is accustomed to microphones and cameras. Wałęsa describes himself as a simple worker, following his heart. The regime has called the strikers traitors. Now the deputy prime minister has been sent to negotiate with them. The strike committee is cautious, knowing that if they push too hard, the game will be lost, and that Soviet military intervention is a real possibility. Negotiators for the workers are in no hurry. Having seized the initiative, they go word by word over the language dealing with independent unions, brushing aside the government's eagerness to move on to other issues.
Punkt po punkcie poprawek godzi każdy następny redagowany. Albo, że tak powiem, przyjmujemy to, co powiedziałem i przystępujemy do realizacji.
Panie premierze, naprawdę to już nie jest dużo pracy w tych najważniejszych punktach. Te inne pole są dość szybko, dlatego też proponuję tyle czekaliśmy. Sobota jest, niedziela jeszcze przepracujemy, zrobimy, będziemy na piśmie, pan premier przyjedzie.
The tactics of the strikers were this. We have to get agreement for free trade unions. All the rest will follow. Wałęsa said, Mr. Prime Minister, let's not talk about these things. These are details. What we have to have is free trade unions.
During nearly 2 weeks of talks, Wałęsa reports regularly to the rank and file. He seeks consensus with an openness unheard of in Poland's official unions. Worker solidarity is not lost on their adversaries.
No previous strike was carried out under so decisively, with such will of victory and such consolidation. The conviction that we have to leave this room victorious. It was the conviction not only of the Inter-Factory Strike Committee, but of all the workers who surrounded us, and the dozens of thousands of people who surrounded the shipyard. All this had its effect. It softened us. Frankly speaking, it did.
Idle factories create pressures that benefit the strikers. In Gdansk, valuable machinery and unfinished ships are being held hostage. Increasingly desperate to resume production, the regime gradually accepts an accommodation. On Sunday, August 31st, an agreement is ready to sign. They have won pay raises, a 5-day work week, relaxed press censorship, free trade unions, and the right to strike.
Widząc jak podpisywane, seeing these accords being signed, we immediately realized that this is the first stage, and it is only now that the real race against time, against the clock, begins for us. And the real tactical, intellectual struggle with the other party, with those in power, is beginning. Because it was obvious to us that they were signing the accords, but they would immediately want to break them.
The race against time begins as Wałęsa and Valentynowicz tour the country to celebrate their success, recruit new members, and create hundreds of affiliated local unions. In 4 months, Solidarity membership grows to 10 million. Explicitly concerned with the welfare of Polish working people, Solidarity can't avoid an obvious reality. Its very existence challenges the supremacy of the Communist Party.
I was feeling that from the very beginning, the other side was preparing to hit us. But when they were ready to hit 100 organizations, by that time there were 1,000 organizations. When they got prepared to hit the 1,000, it was not 1,000, it was 10,000. And it was not 100,000 members, but 1 million, and later 10 million.
They must grow quickly, becoming big enough that when the inevitable backlash comes, Solidarity will be too powerful to destroy. Union activists are harassed, their newspapers censored, offices raided. Workers are ordered to work 2 Saturdays a month, an open breach of the agreement. Solidarity fights back.
Tak. Wydaje mi się, że w poniedziałek postawię cały kraj na nogi. Zrobię strajk. Pan tak przekaże to. Ja mam dość żartów i podjazdów. Panie wojewu, pan dobrze wie. Więc pan przekaże rządowi, że w poniedziałek prawdopodobnie dam rozkaz do strajku generalnego. Dziękuję. Trochę demokracji to trochę wolności osobistej. Jest każdy lud. O, temat.
A year after it was founded, the union re-elects Wałęsa as president. But Solidarity's open democratic structure makes it vulnerable to its own extremists and to infiltrators.
There were some agents, you can hear them on the tapes even now, who were pouring oil on the flames, saying, to make a demonstration in Warsaw, gather 100,000, 200,000 people, and then hand-to-hand fighting. Obviously, there was no other course for the authorities. Either give up power and start democratic elections, or tanks and put us in prison.
On the night of December the 11th, 1981, communist authorities raid a conference of Solidarity's national leaders. The entire presidium is arrested in its hotel. In the next 2 days, Solidarity activists are rounded up by the thousands. Martial law is declared on December 13th.
At the moment when they hit us, I said this. Right at this moment, you have lost. We are winning. And you have driven the last nails into your communist coffin.
Martial law is an admission that the regime has lost the people's consent. Relying solely on the power to prohibit, the regime has lost all ability to persuade. Though the union is banned, popular support for it is undiminished. Solidarity becomes a non-violent resistance movement, infused with a sense of Polish patriotism. Stripped of a central leadership, Solidarity lives on in thousands of small organizations, too many to crush. An underground press unifies them as they both resist and ignore state power.
I knew this was my method to fight. I am not afraid of you. You can lock me up. You can kill me. But you cannot defeat me. So the struggle will continue. It will last some time. It will cost. But we shall win.
For 7 years, repression creates the appearance of stability. But below the surface, the foundation is rotting. In summer 1988, it collapses as price increases, food lines, and rationing paralyze the country. A new wave of strikes is beyond the government's ability to control. The regime offers to re-legalize solidarity if Lech Wałęsa will negotiate an end to the strikes. Within 3 days, the country is back at work. Solidarity has proven itself a capable and responsible force. In February 1989, Solidarity, the government, the party and the church begin round-table talks on Poland's future. After 2 months of negotiations, they agree on free unions, a free press and parliamentary elections. In a 2-month campaign, Solidarity candidates are popular, but no one expects them to dislodge the Communist Party. On June 4th, 1989, Poland votes in the first open democratic elections in more than 60 years. That night, in the square outside Lech Wałęsa's apartment, the victory is celebrated. Solidarity has defeated the Communist Party by a margin of 10-1.
If they just opened a small crack in these doors to freedom, I'd put my working class foot in those doors, and they won't close them.
So, I don't know if there's what exactly to say. Additionally, I do want to say that when we do the course, which will be the course on nonviolent social transformation is in January, starting in January, it's on the dates on the blue flyer, Monday nights, and everyone will do a case study. Everyone who takes the class will do a case study of nonviolent social transformation, successful one. And we'll study in detail the analysis, vision strategy, training nonviolent dilemma, all those kinds of things. And the series, it's a series, so the series is actually starting with communication and action, which is starting on Monday the 24th of October. It's sliding scale, so the cost is not to be very, it's a suggested fee for people that can afford it, and for everyone else that's in negotiation. And there's pink flyers about the communication and action series, and if you could take one and put one up somewhere, please pick it up, and if you would like to register, just see me. I mean, it's a $25 deposit, and then you have your space reserved. So I hope you've enjoyed today's workshop. I hope